Hello, everybody. My name is Mark. You're watching or listening to the Russick Outlook. Thank you so much for joining. Today's discussion is Isolating Israel, Headlines Meets Prophecy, March 2024. And as we often do, if you're looking at the prophetic timeline, it certainly centers on Israel because that is the focal point of Bible prophecy. But we've seen some things this month that, some are startled with, some are a little shaken by, but it points to what the prophets foretold thousands of years ago is starting to take shape. So we're going to investigate that as well as a number of other developments that are going on around the world. But before I begin, if you are a believer, wonderful. If you know somebody who is not or maybe sitting on the fence, this is just a reminder for those on the Russick Outlook email list. We notify you, and on the first Saturday of each month, we have a online Bible presentation, webinar, if you will, but it's interactive. You get to come with comments, questions, suggestions, whatever it is. Maybe it's a Holy Spirit revelation. But this month in particular, let me just cut to the video. We're going to focus on, it's called Sharing the Gospel with Prophecy. And this is I believe, an important tool in the tool belt, if you will, for those of you who are looking to share the gospel, share information about Jesus. Perhaps you're concerned, a loved one, a family member, a coworker, a neighbor, and this is a very, very straightforward approach where we're going to pick apart things that are documented, that are historically factual, that were written in the Bible and foretold. The Bible is the only book in any religious context that will tell you events that are to happen. God says, I speak the end from the beginning, so meaning that he knows what is going to occur. And I believe, and many certainly share this, that when you see that, it starts to open up people's eyes. It may not be the point that will get them over the goal line, if you will, but it may, but it will at least get them talking. And the whole point of this is to, if you know somebody, everybody's welcome. Please email russickoutlook@gmail.com. We will send you the invitation link. It's Saturday, April 6th at 4 o'clock Eastern. And, it's a good time. It's a very relaxed time. And again, it's to give you information, give others information. And I think you're going to be pretty startled with a number of things that we can point to that I'm going to really break a lot of stuff down. And I'm going to cover things that have happened in the news recently, or let's say certainly the 20th century, 21st century. We can point to things that were our prophetic fulfillment. So again, I'm just going to put it up on the screen one more time. It's called Sharing the Gospel with Prophecy, Saturday, April 6th, 4 o'clock Eastern, russickoutlook@gmail.com, and we will send you the information link. While I'm on that subject, just real quick, whatever platform you're on, please hit the like and subscribe button. Rumble, YouTube, all the podcasts. I really appreciate it. It helps us get the information out. And we can see that things are starting to tick in the algorithms of the online presence. We're also on Instagram and X, or the old Twitter. And the heart of this is to just share the gospel, share the truth, share the veracity and the intellectual integrity of the gospel, of the Bible, of Jesus. So that really helps us. Go to the Russick Outlook, sign up for our email list. We just notify you of events that I just discussed and other new presentations, new things coming out. But let me get into this. Sorry, but I had to cover that, and I'm excited about that. So, again, if you know of somebody who you think may be sitting on the fence, may like something like this, please, everybody's welcome. Okay, so let's go to this. Benjamin Netanyahu recently said, if Israel is forced to stand alone, Israel will stand alone. And this is what I'm talking about, the isolation of Israel. And so we're going to cover some things because, sure enough, Israel is kind of being put into a corner. So I'm going to do a little bit of back and forth with some things that happened last month, because I believe what I laid out and I was concerned about started to, in February, did, in fact, start to take place in March. So right now, Israel, the war in Gaza that started, it now involves 10 countries and at least 4 major terrorist groups. So where a lot of this is starting to take place in March is in Rafah, which is the last of the major cities in southern Gaza. As you can see, if you're following me on the map, on the video, I show a map of Rafah, and it's by the Egyptian border. That's where they've been able to get some of the supplies in, the humanitarian aid and whatnot. So let me just kind of set the stage for you, if you will. So a good part of the north and the central part of Gaza has been evacuated, or I should say the Israeli Defense Force feels like they've gotten, or it's probably not that's my New York slang, sorry about that, that they have a hold on what, I don't want to say eliminated Hamas there, because I don't know that, and they may have. But they feel like they have it under control. That's probably the better way to put it. But that as they were moving and starting in northern Gaza and moving down south, then a lot of them came through these tunnels and are down in Rafah. So this is the last major city, major stronghold, but it has certainly a great deal of civilians. People are concerned. And as you know, shouldn't be any surprise to you. You see the news, you see what's happening. There is this massive call around the world for Israel to stop it, to stop the war, even though they still have roughly 100 hostages, and telling them that they can't go into Rafah. And this is what Washington has conveyed to Benjamin Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, and others in the Israeli government. And Israel's mission from day one was they need to remove and eliminate Hamas and any threat to the nation of Israel along its borders. So that's the charge behind this in America, anyway, in the West, really appears to be the stance of staying in power. So a great deal of the Arab community has stood up, and I think it's mixed a little bit with some of the colleges, the universities, students, professors, calling for the stop of the war, free Palestine from the river to the sea, which we know is calling for the elimination of the Jewish people, and they can't obviously support that. So this being an election year, I pointed out last month, I believe, I think there's over 50 nations that are voting for their leaders for the coming year. America is another one. And 46 currently in office is in a great deal of trouble for a variety of reasons based upon his policies. So the people who are supporting the Palestinians are using this as leverage, saying, you know, they're coming against 46, saying we won't support you, particularly in Michigan and Minnesota, where there's a strong Arab presence, and it's leaning, you know, it has leaned blue in the past. So, you know, that's really what's happening. So Netanyahu's response to all of this and the Washington pressure is, we need to go into Rafah to finish the job. We cannot accomplish our mission without going into Rafah. So some of the things that happened within the last couple of weeks in March, as I'm recording this is the end of March, you had a pretty startling speech by Senator Schumer of New York, who is the majority leader in the Senate. And he really basically called for Israel needs to have new elections, and that Netanyahu is an obstacle to peace. So this was pretty unprecedented. And, you know, here, you know, we being Americans, I'm obviously an American, are meddling in the electoral process of the Israeli government, telling them not only how to govern, but trying to force their hand because they're not doing or following the protocol of the war the way we would like them to do it. And the way we would like them to do it is predicated on political pressure to stay in office. It's not about doing the right thing or the wrong thing or the moral objective or standing with your ally. It's about how do we stay in office from the left's vantage point. And that's my opinion, and I think it's pretty clear. I'm sure many others would agree with that. And I think that's important because it shows you the lust of power. There is no principle, there is no character, there is no integrity what's being put forth in these political offices. It's based on how do we stay in power. We're losing votes. They're losing votes based on other policies in addition to this. So they're trying to leverage it. Going back to the video, I show you then after Schumer made this speech, which startled Israel, startled the West, and then the president came out and said he thought it was a good speech. So in other words, and I believe Schumer would not have done this speech without the consent of the White House. Then you had a couple of days before this, Harris, Vice President Harris had said that there would be consequences if Israel invaded Rafah. Now, I show you on the lower right, if you're following me, Thomas Friedman writes an article and appears on a number of political talk show, left-leaning pundits, why Netanyahu is making Israel radioactive. And the reason I wanted to point him out, because I'm going to do a little back and forth now, I personally, in my own opinion, I view him as a water boy for the left. They get the message out of what they want through him and others. But what I noticed last month, he stated in January 31st in his article, a Biden doctrine for the Middle East is forming, and it's big. So as I watch this, because I can see that this was being brought forth from the White House, New York Times, obviously with its clout, and so he started to bring that message and interview people and bring it up in the World Economic Forum in January, and so it was a marketing campaign. And the reason I want to bring this up is I saw a number of other leading media personalities, writers, publications, online digital presence, following suit, almost using some of the same words verbatim, which tells you they're in concert with one another. So the three tracks that and I pointed this out last month, this is not new news for this month, a robust stand against Iran, wonderful. Unprecedented U.S. initiative to form a Palestinian state now, and vastly expand U.S. security alliance with Saudi Arabia and the surrounding area. So with the understanding that Israel is very well aware, history has documented it for the last 30, 40 years, every time Land for Peace has been put on the table, that it's not succeeded because they don't want, they being the leaders of Hamas and other Arab organizations, they want the elimination of the Jews. They don't want a two-state solution, and it's been proven time and time again. So if you look at this, trust me, I am more than sympathetic with the people whose lives have been impacted in Gaza, who do not support this. But what happened was, if you look at where Gaza is on the Mediterranean coast, you roughly a 31-mile stretch, and I think 10 miles, maybe even longer, the depth of it, I forget offhand. But it's the largest populated area, most condensed populated area in the world. But Mediterranean coast, coastal, just a beautiful area in the 90s, built up by the Israelis, and they pulled people out, they gave it to them. And in early 2000s and 2005, they had elections. Hamas was elected. Hamas basically started to take everything down, build all the tunnels, build the military presence in that city, take all the money that's coming in, certainly not help the people and the population there. It was about getting the land of Palestine. So that in and of itself is what they're up against. And the West knows this and others know this. So, to say that they're basically, Friedman and others are saying you must have a Palestinian two-state solution in the West Bank, otherwise known as Judea and Samaria, Gaza, and others calling for also territorial rights to the Palestinians for the Golan Heights. So some of the things that he wrote, and again, this was from last month. Simultaneously, the signals and awareness that the U.S. will never have the global legitimacy, the NATO allies and the Arab and Muslim allies it needs to take on Iran in a more aggressive manner unless we stop letting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hold our policy hostage. We need to start building a credible, legitimate Palestinian authority that can one day govern Gaza and the West Bank effectively as a good neighbor to Israel along final borders that would negotiate together. So that's not reality. It's just not. And you even today, several months later, you've got roughly 75% of the Palestinians support what the Hamas did on October 7th. Or then there's others that say, well, it never really happened. I mean, it's Seinfeld reference, you're in bizarro world. But that is what the Americans and who is, the world superpower and being challenged certainly by China and Russia. But this is what's happening. This is what they're putting forth. So they're trying to squeeze Netanyahu out. And I'll cover a couple of other things. And then Friedman goes on to say, but fortunately, Biden's been around the track enough times to know that Netanyahu is trying to string him along. Sometimes age is an advantage, time to call Netanyahu and the Ayatollahs games at the same time. The Ayatollahs want Israel removed. And sadly, Friedman is Jewish heritage, but he's clearly not. You know what? I don't want to speak for him. I'm not going to say anything. But I want to get in something else that I find incredibly disturbing is they keep putting out numbers of those that have died in the war and in Gaza, and I brought this out last month. But the real shame of this is what the Americans are supporting. This is what the Americans are repeating. So the American administration knows full well these numbers are coming from Hamas, and they are including all of their soldiers that died into the civilian casualties. 46 knows this. They all know it. Friedman knows it, but they still go along with it. So they are intentionally lying to you and lying to the people. And these may be strong words, but I cringe at where the state of American media has gone, where freedom of the press, I always believed, was a staple to the foundation of this nation. And, they cry, this is the end of democracy if the right wins. And when they're the ones who are stalwarting, or that's not a word, who are kind of choking democracy. But what I want to get to is the great deal of length that the Israelis have gone to protect the civilians, and this has been well documented. And this is also brought out by British military. These are other sources as well. So if the UN has come out and said average in war 9 civilians die to every soldier. Afghanistan, America, where we really tried to do our best, it was 5-1. Iraq, we got better at it, 4-1. Right now, in Gaza, even if you use the numbers that Hamas is putting forth, it's 1.5 to 2-1. So they're doing a phenomenal job in doing everything they can to protect the civilians. Any civilian that dies is a casualty, is incredibly sad, disappointing. You see the babies. But what they are doing is they are moving the civilian casualties out and playing with heartstrings in order to get the message. And the Americans are playing patsy with them, and they're doing it. So something else that came out I wanted to point out again this month. Daniel Greenfield is a columnist who writes on socialism, the politically incorrect politics from around the world. He's also the Shillman Journalism Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. But he said this. He notes that one Israeli expert frequently consulted by American officials says, I have been asked by a serious administration figure what it is that will force the Netanyahu coalition to collapse. They were interested in the mechanics. What can we do to demand what can we demand with which it will collapse his coalition? So our government is actively trying to put down this government and take it down. We do have an example of this in the not so recent past in with 44's administration, and well documented. He sent people down from his earlier campaigns to help with a left-leaning, I forget his name offhand, I apologize. This was 2012, 13, somewhere, maybe even 2014. But we put money from the State Department down there to remove Netanyahu from gaining office again. So there's history to doing what the Americans are trying to do today. And if you think how the left just freaked out at the thought that maybe Russia was playing with our elections, but yet it's perfectly okay for these people to turn around and say, oh, but we're going to mess with Israel. We're going to tell them when to have their elections and put the squeeze on them. So these phonies with Friedman and all these others in the media and the administration, they're as honest as a $3 bill. AOC accusing Israel of genocide, and I showed you some other examples of what happened in I'm sorry, do I have the year now? It was 2015 when they tried to oust him. So I show you some information here, show you some political contributions that the Americans were making to remove Netanyahu back then. So then you have this, the highlight to this was the UN Security Council on March 25th calling for an immediate ceasefire with no conditions. Hostages still remain. And so the UN Security Council is 15 nations, and if one vetoes it, that's it. It only takes one. So you had 14 nations supporting it, and the Americans basically turned their back on Israel and said, we'll abstain, which is the same thing as saying we object. So I say right there, you see Israel on a collision course right now. It's pretty straight ahead. The shame of this is the world sees it. The world sees that the U.S., what they've done with their allies, how they've treated their allies. You can go back to Afghanistan, what we did with our allies there, abandoning them, letting them go, others from NATO that were there. We still have Americans in Afghanistan. We still have Americans in Gaza. It's a pretty sad state what's gone on and how far we've sunk. But it goes back to Bible prophecy because it's the isolation of Israel that, where America's presence and friendship with Israel and vice versa. They are very important to us in that area of the Middle East. So it's kind of setting the stage. So when I was watching this, I kept thinking back to, and I've done a video on this a couple of years ago called Dividing Israel, America's Judgment, or God's Judgment on America, I think it was called. But every time, there's a gentleman named William Koenig who's really documented this well. I think it's called Eye for Eye. He's got a great ministry, very involved in Washington, as well as Israel. But he was able to go back and document from the 80s on through. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. It wasn't a political persuasion. But every time we did, it would be almost immediately followed. When we tried to squeeze Israel for land for peace, it was followed with judgment. So that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about here, because when this, and you'll see what I'm going to point to in a second, and again, I mean, you can go to the hurricanes, the disasters, the wildfires, earthquakes, Hurricane Katrina. All of this happened within a day or 2 days after monumentous decisions to get involved with and try to divide Israel's land. And, you can't do it. God, the Lord won't let it happen. It's the only nation that he established, if you go to the Bible, and he established the land. So the travesty that we saw a day later that, if you're watching this, I know you know about this. was about the bridge collapse in Baltimore on the Francis Scott Key Bridge. This happened the next day. So after the Americans abandoned Israel and vetoed in the UN, we saw what happened. So, my question is this coincidence or providence? I don't know, but I'm highly suspicious that it's providence. And I'm going to show you a few other things later, that kind of point this way, some other things that are pretty unique about what happened with this bridge, and I'll get into that. But just going to wind up some information of what's going on with this whole decision and Israel in general. Go back to the video. So the Iranian regime and Hamas celebrated the UN resolution demanding the Gaza ceasefire. Mind you, these are what they're celebrating is, and what they know happened, little children in their pajamas were butchered at their own beds, covered in blood, corpses of young women shot in their crotches. Excuse my detail here. Victims, hands tied behind their backs, charred with fire. Others burned beyond recognition. A terrorist slain over the body of a slain Israeli soldier. He takes out his knife and cuts off the head from the shoulder. There are countless examples of this when they arrived at the scene, and I'm getting graphic, and I apologize because it's pure evil. This is not normal what happened. Heads were rolling around. Genitalia was cut off. This is what happened to the Jewish people in that area on October 7th. So, for them to do what they're doing, rightfully so in my estimation, but also trying their best to minimize civilian casualties, knowing that they're dealing with the people who want them dead. So they hailed the decision as a victory for the regime against Israel. Hanea, who is the leader of Hamas there, argued that the UNSC resolution was an indication of unprecedented political isolation experienced by the Israeli coalition. So once that was done, then they said no more peace talks because they knew they had the advantage again. It's just like, we're getting played beyond, I don't, I'm trying to be nice. It's hard because, you see, this is a matter of right and wrong. This is a matter of morality. And when you see what's happening here and they're changing their policies based upon staying in power and the manipulation of the media, it's sad. Hanea placed the current conflict in Gaza within a global context by arguing it was ultimately a war against Israel and its number one ally, the United States. Gaza war is a world war, and the American ruling body is the main accomplice of the Zionist crime because it is the charge of leading the war of the Zionist regime. The Hamas terrorist organization supported by the Islamic Republic of Iran, which views Israel as the little Satan and the U.S. as the great Satan. So we are their enemy, but yet we're appeasing them. We just 6 hostages. We gave Iran $6 billion. And Iran is behind this. And so then you had the UN chief slammed Gutierrez, calls for the Gaza war as a collective punishment that's going on when he just recently visited Rafah. March 21st, over 90% of Palestinians say no atrocities were perpetrated on October 7th. 93% of Palestinians believe Hamas did not commit atrocities during its mass invasion of Israel on October 7th. 72% support the attack, according to recent polling conducted by the Palestinian Center and Survey Research. Then you had Erdogan, president of Turkey. He is basically came out and he is threatening to send Benjamin Netanyahu to Allah. Keeping on video, with all of this going on, you still have Hezbollah attacks going on in northern Israel. You've got 70,000 people that have been displaced from northern Israel. And then I show you a scene at the Western Wall in Jerusalem, where many of the soldiers are there. They're praying for Jerusalem. They're praying for the hostages. And, you have to feel for the families of these hostages. And again, Israelis, Americans, mostly Israelis, obviously. It's heartbreaking. And some of them are still children and women. Israeli President Herzog, he came out with an anti-Semitic handbook that was captured in Gaza by the IDF going in. And here, I'll show it to you. He's got the book in his hand, so, you can't say that. And the title of the book is called The End of the Jews, and this was presented at the Munich conference, and it was found by IDF soldiers in the co-founder of the Hamas home. Then another thing, Trudeau, president of Canada, saying he's going to cut off arms sales to Israel. In the grand scheme of things, there's not a lot that they do sell to Israel, but it's more pressure. It's a leader of the West coming out and succumbing to the forces of evil, in my eyes, when they're isolating Israel, and this is what this is all about. In the midst of all this isolation, I did want to point out something that I think, that I'm glad that the church, for the most part, is standing with them. So many Israelis, evangelicals, are the only bloc that are now friends with Israel. It's the only one they have. I show you a number of evangelical leaders with Netanyahu in office. What's very important is even the Latino community has been very vocal in their support. And although the Christian community in Europe is a little bit smaller, but they have come out in support. So, I know a number of home Bible groups and churches and studies. They take their pictures, saying they support Israel with the Israeli flag, and they send it over to Israel. It's shared with the soldiers. It's shared with others because, again, when I say isolating Israel, the whole world is coming against them. So when you see the church standing up, it's a wonderful sight to see, and it's also a sad sight that many more in the church are not doing it. I think it's an incredible opportunity to share the gospel, that we are living in these prophetic times. You can point to so many scriptures about what's happening there, about other things that are lining up the way that the Bible has foretold. I can think of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. It's an opportunity that I think more churches should take advantage of, and if not for anything else, educate the members of your church. Know what the history is as far as the land of Israel, Palestine, the role of the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire, and just how that land transferred, and there's so much rich history to it, and it's important to be educated about it because a lot of what you're seeing today in the streets and the protests, people do not know the history. It's plain and simple. Then you had this terrible atrocity in Russia. I'm switching gears now out of Israel. But Russia, to me, is also one of the more important nations when looking at prophecy because of so much of the role that Russia will play in the end of days. So, you see that. You see them navigating their militaries on the border. They're supporting Iran, the enemy, obviously, of Israel, and so many in the West. They're pulling the strings for Gaza, the Palestinians, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen. And, Putin is supporting them because Putin is isolated from the West with the war with Ukraine. And, so there's a lot going on. So that's why I always like to look at what's going on with Russia. And again, he gave out a warning that nuclear war could be happening. You've recently had Finland and Sweden join NATO, so I think it's up to 32 nations. He sees that as another step towards the West coming into Russian territory. He's threatening France. And one of the things that I did want to point out here, we've got the Olympics coming up in Paris this summer. I just encourage you to pray for that. Pray, that they be without incident. I'm sure people will be attempting them. Pray for the security members. Pray for the government of France and the leaders there that they are able to stop any attempted terrorist attack. But French President Macron has sparked the anger of Russian politicians and propagandists after repeatedly refusing to rule out the possibility that they may send NATO troops to Ukraine. So it's a very volatile situation. And again, any one of these things could easily, set in motion some precarious situations that, one wrong step in this world could spiral very fast, whether it's in Russia, Ukraine, in Europe, in Israel, in Iran, certainly. Let's say, Israel, and I think they will at some point, they're going to bomb Iran, and they're going to try to take out some of their nuclear facilities, and that has just a tremendous domino effect. And it's close. That's why, I look at these things. I will switch gears now for a little bit to the rise of technology. I've been interested naturally 2023 with what was happening with AI and how just explosive that is, not only in the business community, but it's being, I should say it this way, it's being utilized almost in every industry. I from technology, obviously, but in the arts and in legal and medical, it's exploding. So just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea, I saw some things this month. Bezos and NVIDIA started to invest in humanoid robotics. They've put up $675 million. The funding round carries roughly $2 billion valuation for the company. These investors include Bezos committing $100 million, Microsoft $95 million, NVIDIA at Amazon both at $50 million, Parkway Venture Capital with $100 million. These are bigger or more GDP than some countries. NVIDIA's robot utilizes a new computer called Justin Thor, which is designed to perform complex tasks and interact safely and naturally with people and machines, including a system on a chip to handle the immense demands on processors to run AI models. So, what we used to see, and I'm old enough to remember George Jetson and the cartoon, it's happening right before us where robots are interacting. There are stories of, trying to remember, there was a Texas company where one robot was not shut down, and it started attacking one of the workers there with, some blunt instruments. Then there's other things of, there was one AI model that learned a language that was not taught by the person programming the language to learn. So then, in other words, it was learning on its own. Then you have this, a major upgrade. The professor this is one from NVIDIA, focuses on foundational models, otherwise known as robots using generative AI for self-supervised learning free of instruction or training. So, trying to create their version of people. Switching gears again, this happened, I believe, in February, where a pastor, Jack Gibbs, was called in to pray for the nation. He was called into Congress and to lead a prayer. I think it was about a 3-minute prayer, and it was, in my estimation, it was nothing, it was nothing if you were a Christian, or even if you're not, you shouldn't have been offended. But he called for God's providence, God's wisdom for the congressional leaders, for the leaders in the Senate and the Congress. But he used, and he asked for forgiveness of our national sins. And people got up in arms over that. Like, what do you mean we're sinning? So what I want to point out is the left freaked out. And they put together a law. It was led by Representative Jared Huffman of California, that Hibbs, who is Pastor Jack Hibbs, is a radical Christian nationalist who helped fuel the January 6th, blah, 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 and has a long record of spewing hateful vitriol towards non-Christians, immigrants, and members of the LGBT community. And then he goes on to list a whole bunch of Dems that signed this. And, I'll put it up for you on video. My point is, I'm familiar with Jack Hibbs for many, many years. I think he's a stalwart. He's one of the, and in my estimation, he's a man of courage, of character, of principle. I've listened to many of his sermons and never heard anything hateful come out of him or anything that's even remotely close to what these people are accusing him of. And really, because Christianity cites, biblical cites, sins that people, they don't want to be accused of sin. We're all sinners. I'm a sinner. Everybody's a sinner. We all fall short. But especially if you're getting into homosexuality, they don't want to hear about that. But what's starting to happen, and I've pointed this out, they're going to use the words Christian nationalism. That's their marketing go-to slogan to try to isolate you, the church. It's going to get worse. They're going to, and it shouldn't be a surprise because Jesus told us this would happen, and they will hate you because of him. But it's happening. But what I did want to point out, and how quickly this is happening. If you're following me on video, I show you Hibbs and his 3-minute prayer, and then the ACLU of South Carolina, the danger of Christian nationalism. But I wanted to point to Billy Graham, who is a consistent visitor of all White Houses, Democrat, Republican, and I show you here with a great number of presidents: Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, George Bush Sr., Ronald Reagan, Kennedy, Johnson, Barack Obama, Richard Nixon, and I think he met with every one of them from, I think with Truman, it could have been starting with Eisenhower, straight up with 45. So, but this is how far away we've gotten now. So if you have a minister, an evangelist go to the White House or go to Congress for a prayer or this, it's got to meet certain protocols before, they would allow that to happen. My point is, the days of Billy Graham and leaders calling for ministers to pray for them, to pray for God's counsel, to pray for God's wisdom, as they're being led, if this nation's being led into war. I think of George Bush Sr. calling Billy Graham into war when the Gulf War started in Kuwait, calling in for prayer. It's a common occurrence that you cannot no longer see. That's how quickly and that's how bad things have gotten. So what I do want to kind of wind this down with is, I know everybody's now familiar with the solar eclipse that's going to happen on January 8th. I did a presentation on it. I think I covered a great deal of the information that's there. But in lieu of everything that we see and some of the stuff that I lined up with and what happened and how America could be under judgment, that Francis Scott Key bridge going down the day after we abstained we being Americans, abstained in the UN. So I go back to what this will look like on video. Again, if you're not familiar with it, you look up April 8th. There's great presentations. Oh, I wish I remembered. There's a woman who's a Christian, but she's an astronomer. She's an amateur astronomer. Oh, I'll think of it. But she did a great book on it, small book, covering all the factual details without any bias. Like, she just, hey, it's going to cover these cities. It's going to come over here at this time. And she got into the astronomical calculations of everything, the odds of everything. Just present the facts, no speculation at all. And then, I think the gist of what I got, I saw a brief interview with her. that, she said this is clearly a sign that the Lord is warning us. So you see the Alpha, the Omega. It's come across. It actually forms an X, the two solar eclipses. Then you had a partial that happened in October, and it looks like the original biblical signs for the Alpha, the Omega, which is the Aleph and the Tav in the ancient Hebrew. So that clearly looks like a warning sign coming to America. And I've pointed this out in great detail on a video I did just 3 or 4 weeks ago. And again, others have done it. But what I am getting at is our country, America, which is important in Bible prophecy for this reason. It's not mentioned in the Bible, not mentioned at all, which makes us wonder, will America fall? And people are already saying it's the fall of the American empires. It's the early stages of it. So I look to what's happening on the southern border, which is a great deal of the problems of what the present administration is fighting for power. You've got Hezbollah terrorists was caught in March on the border. You have MS-13 gang members coming in. Millions and millions of migrants are now not only being allowed into the border, we also found out this month that our government is actually flying them in on airplanes into various airports, dispersing them throughout the country, causing mass chaos. More, then you see Governor Abbott with the National Guard, then the Texas Guard, I'm sorry. They, a group of illegal immigrants stormed the fence, started, going after them. Then you see Chinese nationalists crossing the border. You can't leave China without the CCP knowing it. So they fully know this. Then you have Venezuelan migrants calling for using squatters' rights. And then we're seeing a lot of this happen now, where people are coming into people's homes if they're not there for extended period, vacation or whatever. People coming in, taking over. The laws are written backwards in a lot of the blue states. Then if you look at, I'll go back to video for a second, the human trafficking that's happening at the border. Our administration knows this. 71% of all trafficking victims are women and girls. 3 out of 4 are sexually exploited. Fentanyl, 4,800 pounds were confiscated in 2020, 27,000 pounds in 2023. We know about the deaths. I show you pictures of smugglers, of children, human smuggling, girls being trafficked, drug addiction, all throughout the border, because we have wide open border. There is no more border security. And that's causing a great deal of the problems, because I would say wisely that the Texas governor started shipping and busing, flying a lot of these into sanctuary cities, states that are known to accept this. But it's leading to more chaos. It's leading to more lawlessness, which is what Jesus said would be signs of the times. Then you so I'll show you some statistics about why 46 is nervous. Is his ratings are, they're tanking pretty precipitously. They're using the judicial process as a weapon against the right-leading candidate. Then you have the mass corruption that's going on, that's being hidden. All of this is happening. The borders are rising. Law and order is just, so the poll numbers are plummeting. And this is why I say, it's dangerous, because they being certain people, will do whatever they can to stay in power. And we see a lot of that today. So that's why I wanted to go back to and land, as I get ready to wrap this up, with what happened in the Baltimore Bridge. Let me say this. There's absolutely no reason to know, or no reason that I've seen so far to say this is an accident, meaning that we don't, people have ruled out terrorism, intentionality, if you will. We don't know. You don't know what you don't know. But Lara Logan, who has a lot of great resources, an investigative journalist who I happen to have a lot of respect for, she's come under a great deal of scrutiny for years, and she used to be more left-leaning, but I think she is probably one of the closer definitions to a real investigative journalist looking for where the truth leads, regardless of what the outcome is. And I see some of that happening too in Washington with what Matt Taibbi, who's a former Rolling Stones, I think he was an editor, I know he was a writer, and another partner of his, they were highly scrutinized for what they saw was happening in the government. And, even though they were Democrats, the Democrats just went ape on them. But she wrote this about the Baltimore Bridge. Multiple sources, Baltimore Bridge collapses was absolutely a brilliant strategic attack on U.S. critical infrastructure, most likely cyber, and our intel agencies know it. This is what she's getting from her sources. In information warfare, they just divided the U.S. along the Mason-Dixon line exactly like the Civil War. This is going to be important in a second. Remember that, the Mason-Dixon line. Second busiest strategic roadway in the nation for hazardous material is now down for the next 4 to 5 years. It was built specifically to move hazardous material, fuel, diesel, propane, gas, nitrogen, highly flammable materials, chemicals, and oversized cargo that cannot fit into tunnels. That supply chain has now been crippled or vastly impacted. And that's what she wrote, and that's what she received from some of her sources. I'm not saying that's factual, but it is. I give her a lot of credibility in terms of when she looks into reports from sources. So some interesting things I'm going to show you on the map and why I said remember the Mason-Dixon line. So the name of the ship is Dali, and it means drawn up of God or drawn towards God. That's the meaning of the word Dali. Take that for whatever it's worth. And then I show you on the picture exactly the port of the Baltimore Harbor and how that comes in and where that impacted on the right as the bridge collapsed. And I will say this, when it happened, within minutes, and I said Francis Scott Key Bridge, I knew what happened in Israel the day before, the UN Council in New York concerning Israel, and I immediately, Lord, is this, is this another sign? Without realizing, because I said Francis Scott Key, the author of the lyrics for the Star Spangled Banner, our national anthem, it's a foundation. And so it made me think, at least, is this a sign? Now, the reason I'm saying about the Mason-Dixon line is the eclipse that's coming. It started in the Pacific Northwest and went down and out through South Carolina, Fort Sumter, South Carolina, which is where the Civil War began. And then it comes in on April 8th, overgoing Shelby Park and Eagle Pass, Texas, which we all know is in the news right now. It's right at the heart of what's happening on the Mexican-Texas border. And that's where it's going to start and go through. And we know today we are seeing a state versus federal situation, not only on the ground, but in the courts. Abbott and 46 administration going back and forth about who has the rights to do it. And it's what the position of Texas is, this is a federal responsibility that's not being adhered to or followed up from the federal. So they're going to take matters into their own hands to protect the citizens of Texas, as well as, I would say, the citizens of other states. But what is interesting to me is, again, that eclipse going like this. And if you follow me on the video, right above this area where this happened is the Mason-Dixon line, which was the separation of the Civil War. So coincidence or not, that's for you to decide. But I find all of this compelling. I find it interesting. I pointed this out on April 8th. If you go to Exodus 4:8, I'm going to paraphrase this. that the Lord said to Moses, if they do not believe the first sign, perhaps they'll believe the second sign. 4:8, April 8th, Exodus 8, chapter 4, verse 8. Coincidence? Yeah, maybe. You decide. But I find all of this information as things come by, I wonder, is this what's going on? But the bottom line is this. Jesus is Lord. And as I record this, this is on Good Friday. You'll probably, most of you will see this after Easter, or Resurrection Sunday as we call it. But Christ is risen. It is finished. When Jesus hung on the cross and he said, it is finished, it is. And, what we're waiting for is his return, and hopefully to do all we can to carry the good news. And you can look at some of this as bad news of what I've laid out, and I'm certainly concerned about it. But I also have the peace of God in my heart, which passes all understanding, knowing that the Lord has everything under control. And if you are right with the Lord, if you are right with Jesus, everything will work out one way or another, no matter what. Even the worst circumstance will become the best circumstance. So I just wanted to point out, if you are watching this before Easter, I just grabbed so many different celebration signposts. Just remember, this Sunday on March 31st, or if you're watching or listening afterwards, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is being celebrated all over the world. People are coming to Christ. It's one of the greatest days for salvation, for people to turn their lives over to the Lord. I show you a couple of pictures of the week before, Palm Sunday, where Jesus entered the city the week before, and they laid down the palms as he rode in on the colt or the mule. And these are the Palm Sunday in Jerusalem, where people are reenacting that. So this is a glorious time, and I wanted to emphasize that because there could be a tendency to look at some of this information as bad news, but it's good news in this sense because it's inevitably leading to the return of the Lord, but also to me it heightens the timing of it. It heightens the necessity to get this information out and to share that Jesus Christ is Lord. Which is why I'm doing this thing next Saturday, on April 6th, about the sharing the gospel with evangelists. It is an evangelistic tool, sharing the gospel with prophecy. I'm going to put that back up just in case if you forgot about it. I'd ask you, please email russickoutlook@gmail.com. We'll send you the Zoom invitation. And if not this month, first Saturday of every month, always at 4 o'clock. We'd love to have you. Everybody's always welcome. So that's it. I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate your time. Appreciate everything that you're doing, I'm doing, we're all doing for the glory of the Lord. And we may disagree about certain things as far as prophetic timelines and whatnot, but there's an old expression, or even denominational barriers. Jesus is Lord. We can argue about the rest in heaven, and I like that statement. But if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, I would love to hear them. Please email russickoutlook@gmail.com. If you've made any decisions to turn to the Lord or looking for a church in your area, I certainly would do my best to help you in that regard. So again, questions, comments, email russickoutlook@gmail.com. And remember, you've been watching and listening to the Russick Outlook. My name is Mark, but remember, as always, just my opinion.